Hello everybody, this is Dave Strong and Keegan Feller at the Schmidt Music Saxophone Shop, and today we are here with a guest artist. This is Preston Duncan. Preston Duncan is a fantastic player, fantastic musician, educator. He is the saxophone professor at the University of Minnesota here at the Twin Cities campus, and he's agreed to sit down and talk with us a little bit, answer a few questions, so welcome, thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's been really cool to hear you play, hear you do some educational videos, and those will all be getting out there as well if they're not already posted. But yeah, I asked if we could sit down and talk a little bit about gear, because we're all saxophone players, but we're also a music store here, and it's fun to talk about gear, and I have been a gearhead maybe too much in my past. But yeah, first question, what do you think is the most important when a young student or an advancing student is looking for gear? What's the most important? Maybe what should they look at first out of all the pieces of equipment? Horn, ligature, mouthpiece, reed, different neck screws, all this other doodads. What's the most important? What should they be looking at?
Well, it kind of depends on what their budget is. I think that for most people, first off, by far the most important thing is that you have equipment that functions, right? So sometimes, you may think, well, my horn isn't great, and it's only $100 repair from playing a lot better, right? But, there are obviously horns that are better than other horns. But I would say that when I do have a student that usually the horn is pretty good, but the mouthpiece seems to make the absolute sort of biggest difference in tone and articulation and all that. And I'll just go ahead and mention some names, but there are a handful of really good mouthpieces, I think, for classical playing. I use the Van Doren AP4, and I also use the Lyric SaxQuest mouthpiece. Both of these are fantastic mouthpieces. The Selmer makes some really good mouthpieces, and Van Doren has other good mouthpieces. The Rousseau mouthpiece is really good. There's quite a few really good mouthpieces on the market, but they're not all created equal, meaning that if you get 10 Selmer mouthpieces, they're not all going to play the same. So you have to make sure you kind of try it out, and if you have a teacher that can try it out for you, that's even better. So getting a good mouthpiece and a good reed is really important. I use a Ligatures signature series, and I know that some people think the sound is a little less for them. I've never had anyone even know I play one, and I think one of the things that I get most of the comments on has to do with tone. And I don't notice, especially now that I've spent the time to really play with exclusively Ligatures, I don't notice any difference other than I don't stay awake at night worrying about my reeds.
Yeah, actually, speaking of that, did it take you a little while to get used to those? Because we have a lot of people ask about this year. I actually had a similar experience this last weekend. I finally started playing them on some of my performances, and nobody noticed. And I even asked a couple people, like, hey, I played on a synthetic reed. But for me, at least, it took a while where I felt comfortable. And maybe some of that's just muscle memory. But
yeah, I think right away I noticed that it was a lot more consistent, right? But then over time, I started to, not only be able to sort of mitigate things that felt a little different at first, but also realizing the things that are always superior about that. So like, for example, altissimo, like I can't play a high, super high F or E on every cane reed, right? But on a Ligatures, it's always there, right? I can always play quiet. And again, they're not all exactly the same, but they're very, very close. And it has really freed me up more, I think, than anything else, because I hated having to break in reeds and take care of them and worry about the humidity. And when you travel and you change altitudes or humidity, all of a sudden your reeds are half strength harder. And it's just like with Ligatures, it's not part of it. It's just so much better.
In Minnesota, we have like many different climates depending on the time of the year, and probably not worrying about humidity is probably good.
And mold, because you want to keep your reeds under climate control. Then this is just, and they last a lot longer. And for teaching, I have all my students use it, because then when I have a student that does something that's not great, which happens, it's never the reed's fault.
Yeah.
So diagnostically, I can say, oh, well.
I could be a negative, though, because that takes away one excuse I have.
Yeah,
Right.
well,
Yeah.
if you're looking for excuses.
If you want to have at least, it's this reed. But no, seriously, it is. It's something that really exciting, just because you're not dealing with one more variable.
Right.
So, if you don't mind, let's talk about instruments and horns. And you play one of the buffet senzos, and you've got the kind of double silver body, copper neck.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about how you came to be playing that horn, what you played before, and why you picked what you picked?
Yeah, I played Yamaha my whole life, and they make great saxophones, especially their beginning and intermediate models. I think are really, really good, and their EX2 and the Z are great instruments. And I really liked my Yamaha, but then I was teaching in Switzerland with Ivan Roth, famous Swiss saxophonist, and he had a senzo, and he said, try this, and it was just like, I didn't, it's funny because I spent my whole life playing saxophone until just a couple years ago, and then I tried this thing and I realized, oh my gosh, there's all these colors and all like an extra level of volume and intensity, and the intonation on it was just so much better. It's different, so like when you first try it, you're like, why is my low G slightly sharp?
Yep.
Right? Like that's weird, right? But that middle range between the D and the C sharp is perfect, nearly perfect.
Which is a really hard part of the horn.
Yeah, it's
Right.
really good.
To call even good, much less perfect.
Yeah, and then what you have in that lower register when you have that G, F, and F sharp and G sharp that are a little bit sharp is what you realize really quickly is that bringing those down is super easy. Whereas when you're on a, I don't want to mention a name, but another famous brand, and you go up and you get to B and C and you're flat. And then C sharp is even worse. And then you have to do all this manipulation.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you get to D, boom, you're sharp.
Yeah, there's that exact break there. And I think that's, you say one brand, that's most saxophones. That's just a tricky area of the horn. And, you get used to it and you can overcome it. But especially you as a classical player, I imagine that's super fast.
I was having to do a lot of gymnastics on some of the instruments I played in the past that I've tried out. And with that senzo, it is smoothed out. So when you go up, you're on that lower part, on the G and the F, and you're kind of lowering it, and then you come up, and it's just great. Yeah. It just takes a little time. I mean, if you get used to playing one of the traditional popular horns, you get used to a certain feel. And this instrument is different. It's shorter, the tube is bigger, it's just different. So the ergonomics feel different, and at first it might feel a little bit, it did for me, a little strange. And it took about 6 months to be able to get that sort of like really good technique. But it's there, and I would never change it. And then for soprano, I still play, since it doesn't have a soprano out yet, I still play a Yamaha 62, which I've played since I was 14.
Cool.
A 62R.
Those are really solid sopranos.
Oh, it's a great instrument. Great instrument. And everybody that's tried my soprano says it's the best one I've ever played.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah. Have you tried my soprano?
No, is it for sale?
No.
Oh.
Don't touch it.
Maybe I don't want to.
Don't even look at it.
Don't look at it.
I'm
Don't
always
talk about
afraid when someone's like, try this, but it's not for sale. I was like, well, that's just going to ruin my day.
And then, and the last part, not the last part, the other part of equipment would be the ligature. And I see a lot of people going crazy about ligatures and sort of, well, this one's got a brushed nickel finish and this has got a rose gold.
Plutonium core.
I just, honestly, I don't really get it.
Yeah.
I think there are differences in a ligature that are significant. I think being made of a solid piece of metal, I think having one screw, because you save man hours and it has less material. And I think the way it contacts the reed, and the perfect ligature for that is the BG. The Duo or the Soloist, I think, are the best.
Sure.
And they're affordable, and they produce a great sound and great response. I've never tried anything better, but I've certainly seen a lot that are more expensive.
Yeah, it's its own rabbit hole of a world.
Yeah.
And I know our advice is always like, well, you can play with all that stuff. You can get all these fancy ligatures, but it's going to affect the least, and it's probably not something to spend most of your time on.
Yeah.
If you're nuts like me, you'll spend too much just to find that out for real. But
And it's so funny too, because some of the more expensive ones I've tried that have like these crazy sort of claims of like, well, we cryogenically froze this, or this is made from a blessed by a rabbi. I don't know, but some of the ones I've tried, they don't actually hold the reed on well.
Sure.
Yeah.
which is
Okay.
like the single, like most simple thing you need a ligature to do.
Well, I don't know your thoughts on this, but a lot of, especially when they get really heavily over-engineered, when I go up and back, I prefer the $5 2-screw metal ligature to a lot of those.
Just for simplicity's sake.
I hate to say that. I work in a music store. Sorry, but it's true. You know,
Yeah.
if you want to be solid, I agree with you. I think metal less things rather than. But that $5 nickel-plated basic no-name one is
Preferable
keeps
to
up.
many.
Yeah,
But
it's good to hear you say that.
Yeah, but the BG, because it's a solid piece of metal with just one really well engineered screw, which matters because of the way it, I don't want to say resonates, but the way it dampens vibration or holds together, is kind of the perfect ligature.
And it's light. It's not. Yeah, which I think matters too.
And it comes in pretty colors.
You have the red one on yours.
I've got a rose gold one. I've got a silver one. I've got a gold
Yeah,
one.
Nice.
I gotta admit they do look cool. But.
Yeah.
So kind of all-encompassing, there's this other category that if you want to get in fights on the internet, you can talk about. But
Let's do
all
it.
these other things, heavy mass screws, things that you attach on to add weight, how gigantic the bell of your horn is, putting extra weight here and there. Any thoughts on those?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we can cut this out if it doesn't go
fine.
well.
I don't mind getting into this. I just feel like sometimes, all of these companies, like they have salespeople that work together and they're friendly and they're super nice people. It's just that the issue is that some of this stuff is sort of a con. Because what happens is we all use sort of these shortcuts, right, to sort of determine whether or not something is quality. One of those is weight. So if you pick up an instrument and it's really light, it doesn't feel like quality. If you pick up one that's really heavy, it feels like, wow, this is really substantial, right? So some of these things that add weight, it's really nothing more complicated than that. And I won't say anything other than just blind test yourself. I used to go and try things out, and here's the thing. People are dumb, but we're all dumb.
Yeah.
I'm dumb too, right? So
yeah.
I go try out a solid silver neck, and I am sold. I sound fantastic. This is the best thing I've ever played. I can't believe it, but I know I'm dumb. So I grab my wife. I say, come to the practice room with me. We're at a conference. And I cover my eyes, and I have her change the necks, right?
So you put your wife through that too.
Yeah. She's a very patient woman.
Mine too.
And then, sure enough, I picked my neck, right? Because there's a thing that happens when you're trying something that you are hopeful is going to make you better.
Yeah.
And that thing is like this psychological, like, oh, wow. And maybe the read's on a little bit different, or maybe it's just the way you're approaching it. But different isn't always better. So just blind test everything. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And that's, it's easy to get really involved in that and also forget to practice. So
Right.
practice is probably important too.
I mean, don't spend $500 on a ligature. Go get some lessons.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So kind of one final one. Let's say maybe a few scenarios. So we're talking a middle schooler looking for their kind of first thing to improve their sound equipment wise, maybe a high schooler, and then like a higher level college player professional. How you mentioned there's inconsistencies in every brand and everything, which is absolutely true. How should a young player approach finding what they do next?
In terms of equipment?
Yeah, a little bit of the process. If you have any thoughts on that, like I am going to go to college next year, I need a new alto saxophone to be ready for college. What's the best way to approach that?
Well, one thing is you want to check with your teacher. And I've had many students, I've had students show up with just trash instruments. And I say, why did you get that? And they say, well, I liked it the best. It's like, well, you're not good yet, though. I mean, like, what do you don't really know? No offense. It's just what may feel right to you and all of your bad habits isn't necessarily like the best thing. So always check with somebody that's better than you. Find what you like, of course, and then check with somebody that is better than you or somebody that sounds like you want to sound. Or your teacher, because if you go to, say, a certain university, maybe that teacher's only played Selmer. And they're going to know everything about how to manipulate that Selmer, but as soon as you bring in something else, they're going to, I think most good teachers can manage most or all of the brands, but you want to check that. And then make sure you get a good mouthpiece.
Yeah.
Oh, and the last thing was, because we're doing product stuff, which seems really like not that big of a deal, but the neck strap. You would think this technology would have been solved like 75 years ago because it's, it's not that crazy hard or anything. But not until this thing. This is the breathtaking neck strap, and it is by far the best one I've ever used. I couldn't play for a long time, years, because I was injured, and this thing has saved my career. Along with the Jazz Lab I used for a while, which is also really good. But this is very, I don't even notice that I'm holding a saxophone.
Well, it doesn't look like, I like that sax holder as well. It's a little more of a contraption, and then you see some of them where you have to like get into a harness suit. And there's 8 clips. And that looks pretty simple, and it's got that little back around the back strap there.
Yeah, the fundamental, I think the most important difference is that when you get one of those harnesses that has all the straps, you are constantly having to adjust your body to however you have the strap situated, right? Whereas this, because of the way it's designed, it just falls, just like a neck strap. Same angle as a neck strap, as the normal neck strap. It feels totally natural, and I never have to contort my body. And those little tiny, the thing is, you don't think about it, but I swear, if you're playing with one of those harnesses and you move your shoulder up just a little bit, and you do that for 6 months, next thing you know, you've got some technique problem in your third finger on your right hand, or you've got, some arm issue or whatever.
Chiropractor.
Yeah, you just gotta always try to remove tension constantly, and equipment is part of that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's about it for now. Any other burning questions? Any of that?
No.
Well, if you do have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. We'll be keeping an eye out for that. Reach out to us at the Sax Shop at schmidtmusic.com. Otherwise, thank you so much, Preston.
Sure. Also, I have a ed group on Facebook called Preston Saxophone. It's a closed group. Has about 600 members now, and if you ask to join, you can join. It's a good way to make contact with me. If you have questions, I always answer them. You can send me a message or whatever. Thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
See you next time.